which include food rationing, water contamination, even suicide attempts. President Trump and his defense secretary insist it's really not that bad.
Completely misrepresented. Listen, we make sure that every ship, every crew, every captain has everything we can provide them at every single moment.
Has the deployment's gone on too long?
No. Not nearly long enough.
Feels very selfish and petulant on the president's part because he had his own ulterior motives. We don't know what they are.
Why don't you hold true to your word when Donald Trump said he was going to get engaged in no new foreign wars in the Middle East? And yet, here we are, $130 billion that we've spent on a war in the Middle East.
The anecdotes might be real. There might be legitimate people suffering with real psychological problems, real distress, and that's something we should take seriously. But the Navy was clear, there is no panic in terms of...
Speaking to Kerry's point about the illegal war, we said nothing under the Obama administration when the USS Truman was deployed for 7 months straight to fight ISIS.
Yeah. Now prices are higher, healthcare has been cut, food assistance has been cut, Epstein files still aren't released, inflation surging, 30% higher than Joe Biden.
Guys, recently on Abby Phillip Show, MAGA Pundits got absolutely wrecked trying to defend Donald Trump's treatment of the sailors and Marines aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. The progressives on the panel fact-checked these MAGA supporters so hard that they were left sitting in awkward silence. Now, let's see what exactly happened during this heated debate, and I'll share my thoughts as we go.
Families of sailors aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln sound the alarm about the ship's abysmal living conditions and a mental health crisis on board. Their concerns are falling on deaf ears. The Lincoln and its 5,000 sailors left San Diego last November, and it hasn't made a port call in more than 200 days. That's a modern-day record, not the good kind. And consider the fact that carriers generally return to port within 30 to 45 days. The conditions are pushing sailors to the breaking point. Despite families' desperate pleas to Navy leadership and media reports recounting the dire conditions, which include food rationing, water contamination, even suicide attempts, President Trump and his defense secretary insist it's really not that bad.
Completely misrepresented. Listen, we make sure that every ship, every crew, every captain has everything we can provide them at every single moment.
Family members of U.S. service members are concerned about the conditions on board the USS Lincoln.
Well, no, that ship is moving. No, they're not.
Has the deployment's gone on too long?
No. Not nearly long enough.
Well, President says not nearly long enough. Joe, do you agree?
He was kidding. He smiled. Not a great joke, though. Not
think the families appreciate that?
No. And again, not a well-timed joke. Families are right to have concerns, but we have always placed our sailors, soldiers, and Marines in difficult conditions in time of war. We are in an active war. This ship is serving in an active conflict. I think the narrative out there, though, that the Trump administration has somehow ignored this problem, I think that's really where the line has been crossed. They deployed the USS George Washington weeks ago to relieve the ship. It's on the way. That was happening before the stories came to light about some of these conditions. Still, these are troops in active combat situations, and we should be appreciative of the work they're doing. I hope they get relieved soon, but unfortunately, from time to time, over the 250 years of our country, we have asked our soldiers and sailors to do some great things.
I'm not sure the problem is with the we appreciating. It might be with the President and the Secretary of Defense. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. I think there is nobody here who doesn't deny the sacrifices that these soldiers have made, or these sailors have made. But at the same time, if you really want to give something back to these sailors, why don't you hold true to your word when Donald Trump said he was going to get engaged in no new foreign wars in the Middle East? And yet, here we are, $130 billion that we've spent on a war in the Middle East at the hands of the president who came into office on the idea that we would be focusing on America first. Yeah. Now prices are higher, healthcare has been cut, food assistance has been cut, Epstein files still aren't released, inflation surging, 30% higher than Joe Biden leaving office, and yet here we are spending tens of billions of dollars on another war in the Middle East.
This is the issue, and I understand what Joe is trying to say. We are at war, but this is, as many people have said, a war of choice. No one knew. An illegal war, in fact, and we're not using the word to describe what it is appropriately. So you can only imagine how the families of these sailors feel knowing that they are in these deteriorating conditions. They know that they aren't necessarily supposed to be here on an act of Congress. Again, feels very selfish and petulant on the president's part because he had his own ulterior motives. We don't know what they are. We also don't know really what's going on because they refuse to give us all the information. There is no transparency.
Guys, it honestly makes me sad to see what these sailors and Marines are reportedly going through while serving in a war zone. Roughly 5,000 sailors and Marines aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln have been living under extreme conditions for more than 260 days at sea. Yeah, you heard that right. More than 260 days, including more than 200 days without a port call. The ship left San Diego in November 2025 for what was supposed to be a normal deployment. Then, as the conflict with Iran escalated, everything changed. The Lincoln was redirected toward the Middle East, and instead of heading home, this crew was pulled into a major war effort. By July, the carrier had already broken the modern record for spending more than 200 consecutive days at sea. Guys, we're talking about 9 months. 9 whole months. And this isn't just about being homesick or tired. Sailors and their families have raised serious concerns about food and supply shortages, water quality, exhaustion, plumbing issues, and worsening mental health. There have also been reports of sailors attempting to jump overboard. But let's not present every allegation as proven fact. Even one sailor reaching that point should be enough to make Washington pay attention. These are people operating weapon systems and aircraft, working exhausting shifts thousands of miles from home, while the finish line keeps moving farther away. And guys, when Trump was asked about these extraordinary lengths of the Lincoln's deployment, his response was hard to believe. Trump said, "Not nearly long enough." Are you serious? 9 months in intense conditions and you're saying not nearly long enough? Try telling that to someone 9 months into a war zone deployment who hasn't seen their family since last November. That's the kind of mentality that makes you wonder whether the Trump administration has any regard for these sailors and Marines. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has pushed back too, saying these reports about deteriorating conditions have been misrepresented? What? Wait a second. You idiot. These concerns are coming from the families of the sailors and Marines. We're talking about military families, people with husbands, wives, sons, daughters, all aboard that ship. And now, with these concerns making national headlines, the Navy is sending the USS George Washington toward the Middle East to relieve the Lincoln.
We're working on what we have to hear based on what these families are saying. And then I also feel like, let's just talk about why there are so many mental health conditions. They said we had one soldier, I guess August 3rd, sometime around that first week of August, who decided to go overboard because he was feeling as if he could not take it anymore. I was just looking it up for fun, for giggles, because we're here in stats. It says that after 15 days of confinement, you start to feel, if not off, you feel some level of mental unhealthiness. 15 days. How long have they been there?
Thankfully, the military takes this very seriously. They were very clear that there's been no statistical uptick in suicide attempts by people on the ship. The anecdotes might be real. There might be legitimate people suffering with real psychological problems, real distress, and that's something we should take seriously. But the Navy was clear. There is no panic in terms of statistical increase.
Let me pick up on this real quick. So the President and the Secretary of Defense have said no problem. We heard the clips in the beginning. But we're hearing very different things come out from the soldiers, from their families. Let's take a quick look at some of the things that we have heard from those families talking about problems that may be happening on that ship. One family said, quote, "We already had an instance where watchstanders had to stop someone from jumping." Another family said that we've just been turning and burning the whole time we've deployed. Nothing to really look forward to at this point. All we want is a day home. What we are hearing from the people on board that ship and the families is decidedly different from what we're hearing from the President and the Secretary.
I think it's probably actually worse than the reports indicate, because who is more likely to underestimate, shove aside harsh conditions than the U.S. military? I mean, these are people who do not complain. And the issue, Ellie, is the 275 consecutive days. Like you said, that's the issue, is they have not been at port. But, speaking to Carrie's point about the illegal war, we said nothing under the Obama administration when the USS Truman was deployed for 7 months straight to fight ISIS. I'm glad he did it. We said nothing under Biden when the USS Eisenhower was deployed for 9.5 months almost. We were glad he did it because they were fighting radical regimes in the Middle East and defending us, and they have broad Article 2 constitutional authority to do so. I'm glad they're there sticking up for us. The problem is the consecutive days.
Ed, one more point to that. There is more outrage, it seems, from Democrats over spoiled milk in the galley and conditions on the ship than there was from Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, where 13 American service members died.
You guys love a what if.
No, it's
what
not
about?
a what if. It's not a what if. It's harsh conditions against soldiers serving overseas. Joe Biden ended with 13 deaths over a withdrawal. Okay, that's the record that
we're talking
I
about
think is
something that's
shameful.
happening right now in 2026. Whataboutisms don't work.
Donald Trump came into office on the pretense that he was going to engage in no new wars on the Middle East. So why is that okay? Why is the fact that this guy who campaigned on a very specific idea of not doing the exact same thing that all of his other predecessors have done, the thing that he told all of these people that were going to his rallies that he swore he would never do, why is it okay now, 5 minutes later, to engage in this exact kind of war that he swore he wouldn't do?
Guys, at this point, we're starting to see Trump's entire approach to this war. Remember what he sold voters on during this campaign? He was supposed to be the leader who kept America out of endless foreign wars. He promised to put America first. He spent years criticizing past presidents for burning American money and blood in wars with no clear ending. And yet, here we are, months into a major conflict with Iran, and American sailors still don't have a clear answer about when they're coming home. And that uncertainty is its own kind of mental strain. If a sailor knows I'm home in a month, at least they have a date to work towards. But when the answer is basically, we'll let you know, every morning starts looking exactly like the one before it. That is exhausting, both physically and mentally. And it gets even worse when the president keeps changing his stance about how and when this war will end. The Trump administration keeps telling Americans this thing will be resolved soon, yet months later, there's still no clear end to the conflict. The war has already put enormous strain on the Navy's carrier fleet. And here's the part that's almost funny. When asked about Trump's constantly changing statements, MAGA commentators have no real answer. They keep screaming that Democrats are weak on national security, but that is not the answer. Everyone has the right to hold Trump accountable because he's the one who launched this war. You can believe Iran is a threat, but we still have every right to ask what the exit strategy is. And that's where Republicans have a serious credibility problem. For years, Republicans lectured everyone about congressional authority and constitutional limits, but the second Trump launches a major military campaign, suddenly those concerns seem to disappear. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war, while presidents have authority to respond to threats. But Trump launched this military campaign without congressional approval, raising serious questions about the limits of presidential war powers. And here's the question nobody in the Trump administration wants to answer. What is the actual endgame? Destroy Iran's military capabilities? Keep the Strait of Hormuz open? Force Tehran to negotiate? Destroy Iran's capability to develop nuclear weapons? Those are different goals, requiring different strategies. If Trump, his defense secretary, or his allies can't tell Americans which one they're pursuing, people have every right to be suspicious.
For all those people who say, oh, well, Iran's been an issue for, 47 years, that's the talking point, that's something he knew during the campaign.
That's not a talking point.
So if that was true during the campaign, because that falls within the 47 years, why was that? What changed from November of 2024 to August of 2026?
There is a very fair criticism by members of the Republican Party that Donald Trump has engaged in this war. That is not something that Republicans can sweep under the rug. There are two sort of paths that Republicans were hoping to go down. Most Republicans didn't want the new wars. That said, do you want a nuclear Iran? I don't. Do you want Iran to not fund terrorist proxies as it has for the last 47 years? I don't.
Then
if
why
this
would
is the course of action,
campaign
if this is
on
the
no
course
new
of
foreign
action
wars
the president
if-
chose, I think it's a noble one. I think the end result of a non-nuclear Iran, less funding of terrorist proxy groups, is ultimately a better thing for the world.
Well, you're calling it an illegal war, and we're saying maybe it's a stupid war, maybe it's a bad explanation for a war. Why don't you just stick to that? Why do you have to go all the way to an illegal war when Obama had the same thing, no congressional approval to fight ISIS? Biden had the same thing, no congressional approval to fight the Houthis who were attacking our troops.
Let's talk a bit about some of the promises that have been made and some of the
I agree, it's
forecasts that have been
I
made.
totally agree
First of
with
all,
that.
the president was quite clear in the beginning that this war would not last anywhere near this long.
Totally
Let's take
fair.
a quick listen to some of the things the president has said about how long he expected the war in Iran to last.
Right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks.
The U.S. will be gone or done with the war in 2
I
or 3
think we're
weeks?
2 or 3 weeks. We were in there for 2 months. And you know what? We're going to have victory very shortly. I thought it would take 4 to 6 weeks, and I was right.
He was not right.
I don't
Why
think
was he
you
so
can-
wrong on that?
Oh, well, I don't think you can defend the indefensible. I think the service members on these ships don't know what the mission is.
Yep.
And after Operation Midnight Hammer, which I was an ardent supporter of, the explanation became much less clear why we were re-engaging. And I think those are very fair critiques.
Guys, don't go anywhere, because here comes the bill. And this is where things hit ordinary Americans. Wars are expensive, and they never stay neatly inside a military budget. They spill into energy markets and household finances. The Strait of Hormuz matters because it carries a massive share of the world's oil supply. So if this conflict continues, energy prices could climb even higher. You don't need an economics degree to understand what happens next. Transportation costs rise, energy bills go up, and groceries can get more expensive. American families feel it at the gas pump, then in their everyday expenses. And that's not all. One estimate cited by Tyler Cohen puts the broader cost of the conflict above $130 billion. And meanwhile, military families are sacrificing the time and experiences that families cherish. Missed anniversaries, missed birthdays, worried parents, exhausted spouses, and kids who haven't seen their mom or dad in months. That's the human cost that disappears when politicians like Trump turn war into a scoreboard. And here's my question for Trump and every MAGA pundit defending him. If you call this a success, why can't you give Americans a simple definition of victory? And if everything aboard the Lincoln is perfectly fine, why do sailors and their families keep describing a very different reality? You can't support the troops by brushing off their concerns, and you certainly can't claim to be America first while treating their sacrifices like an afterthought. These sailors deserve clean water, medical care, sufficient food, proper rest, mental health support, and most importantly, a clear plan for getting home. Behind every uniform is a human being, not a scoreboard number, a real breathing person. So that's it for today, guys. What do you think about Trump's handling of the problems faced by these sailors and Marines? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in the next one.